DIA 6479 is not just a number. It belongs to a car that has started a revolution in India. It's the first Maruti 800 that rolled out of the production line from Gurgaon. But how's been the journey so far, and what is the future? What is nostalgia and emotions about the company? To talk all that and much more, today we are joined by Mr. Shashank Srivastava, Senior Executive Officer, Marketing and Sales of India's largest car maker. Welcome, Mr. Srivastava.
Thank you very much.
To us. And let's begin by your emotions when you see this car every time, DIA 6479. What's in your mind?
Yeah, so as you just mentioned, this is the first car ever sold to the customer. And the first car I remember was sold to a Sikh gentleman, Harpal Singh, and he used to work in Indian Airlines, and this car was handed over to him by none other than the then Prime Minister, Mrs. Indira Gandhi. And as you said, it started a revolution, and today, we have placed it here in our brand center. This was taken from that customer in 2010, restored, and we have it here. It's very emotional for, not just for me, but for all employees here. So whenever we pass by, we remember this is the place where we started with. And in those days, very few vehicles were produced. India was producing only 50,000 cars in the whole year. Today, we are producing, as you know, 10,000 cars every day. The industry, I mean. So, very nostalgic. This is where we started. At that time, in auto industry was contributing just 1.2% for the GDP. Today, it is contributing 7.5%. So, we are sort of proud, and at the same time, this keeps us reminding us of how it started in the first place.
This rolled out from the Maruti Udyog factory in Gurgaon. Yes. Gurugram, what is it called now? It changed the whole, we can say that the atmosphere in Gurugram as well. As we understand, the company, the factory started, Maruti factory started. Tell us how it, if you remember, how it changed not just the face of the small car market in the country, but for Gurugram also it was
yeah, absolutely. In during those times, the industrial hub in the north was Faridabad, and Gurgaon started then. Our chairman, Mr. O. Suzuki, tells us, because he was there even before the production started, when he was coming to India to discuss this sort of collaboration with the Indian government. He used to say that there used to be just cows in Gurgaon, and that was the impression he carried, because it was a very rustic and a very agrarian sort of town. But when Maruti came, and you saw so many investments coming in, a large production base built there, a lot of vendors shifted there for production now, because we were very, very focused on localization. Employees came in, and when they did so well, you saw the entire industries coming up, and that linked with the other service sector as well coming in and developing in a big way. And today, Gurgaon is really throbbing city, not the small town which it was there before Maruti came.
So in the 80s, Maruti Suzuki took off. It took the whole nation for a ride, not in the real sense, but yes, it enabled that whole country could afford a small car. There was a large waiting list also. Yeah. Tell us something about how you, later on when the competition came, because you did so well, how did you tackle the competition from Volkswagen to Ford to your Toyota to every company that wanted to come to India came for that small car market, and you had to fend off that competition also?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, because I think the transformation of Maruti Suzuki is one of the biggest achievements of the company. Of course, we have contributed hugely to the Indian manufacturing sector. We are the leaders in the automobile for the last 40 years of its existence. So, but it goes beyond that. And this transformation actually started coming in from the time in maybe the early 90s, when you had the liberalization era. A lot of other manufacturers came in. And remember, before that, it was the capacities were licensed. by the government, and then there was a liberalization where other people could come in. I remember Tata came in, then Hyundai was there, Ford, GM, and so many other players, Honda, and so on. The general thought at that time in the media, as also among the general public, was that Maruti Suzuki, because we had that public sector sort of starting, therefore people said that maybe we'll not be able to compete with these very large the manufacturers who were like there for maybe 50, 60 years in the industry. So we took that transformation drive and became more nimble, became more focused on the market, and we became very competitive. And that's the reason why, Maruti Suzuki is as far as I know, the only company in the world which has been the market leader from the inception till these next 40 years that we have been here. So it speaks volumes of how quickly we adapted to the changing economic scenario, as also the consumer preference, as also the technology. So I think it's been a great effort from our employees, our vendors, our partners, that we were able to tackle the changing scenario so efficiently and well.
Well, that was about the past. You took off. Later on, you had to face challenge. Then you became well entrenched. Let's talk about the present. When many companies have folded up from India, you have always kept the ball rolling, or maybe the cars going off the production line and selling into the market. What about the consumer trends now also? What the new trends that you are now noticing in consumers, judging them well, because you have to be ahead of the curve to keep selling cars?
Absolutely. Again, great question. We have seen the change happening over the years, in not only in automobile, but in the country as such. So primarily, of course, is we have seen great economic growth in our country. So when we started in the early 80s, the GDP per capita was about $700, $600 per person. Obviously, the consumption would be accordingly, not so much. Then today it is about $3,000 per person. So a good growth in the income level itself, which is reflected in the consumption patterns and also the psychology of the consumer. So if you see, earlier it was basically about functionality in a car, but now it is also about aspiration. That's, I think, a big change. Then if you look at it the segment wise, today SUVs and the larger MPVs seem to be attracting the attention of the consumer compared with the earlier ones, which it was largely hatches and the small cars. If you talk of the type of buying, earlier it was almost everybody was a first time buyer, but today about 30% of the buyer is replacement buyer, and about same percentage is additional car buyer. So multiple cars in the factory happened. Women buyers have increased if you talk about the gender. So all in all, I think huge changes in the market and the consumer preference, and that's what makes this field so exciting.
Okay, and that was about the whole idea. But two main things that are happening now: small car market, it's actually not growing. And how do you feel about it? And what is the outlook now going forward? The small car market is not growing.
So before I answer this question, there is also a change in the powertrain and technology. So the powertrain, like earlier it used to be both large percentage was diesel and gasoline, but now you have multiple technologies, EVs, hybrids, and CNG, and so on and so forth. That's what let's park that aside. But talking about your question, which is about small cars, you are right. The small cars just about 3-4 years back were about 45-46% of the overall passenger vehicles industry. But now they are about 28%. And it's not just the percentage, the absolute volumes have also dropped. At its peak, it was 2017-18, hatches were about 15.5 lakh. Now, this year is expected to be 12 lakh. But remember, 12 lakh is also significant. And that's very important for us, because we have 70% of this market. So while overall our market share is 42-43%, but in the hatch segment, we are actually 70% of the market. And we sell almost, like in this year, we should be probably selling almost 8.5, 9 lakh vehicles in this segment. And that's a pretty large volume. That's larger than the sale of our second number automaker. So in that sense, it's a very important segment. And I believe that the drop has happened in hatch sales largely because the affordability factor became adverse, which means that the income level of this category consumers didn't go up while the prices went up in a larger proportion. But going forward, I think given the demographics of our country, 65% of the people are below 35 years of age, first time buying very high still, the public transport not so developed. So transportation of private ownership of transportation will be there, and I think we are not at that level of income levels where people can straight away go to the very large cars. So I think small cars will see a rebound, and our calculations show that it probably be sometime in the second half of 2026.
So as we think about the journey, COVID was a time when actually everything stopped. Later on, the bounce back of market was great. Now we have seen such a good growth in 23, 24, and the last month of the financial year, you are putting up capacity. But what about the next year? Does it look like a slowdown is coming, a slowdown of sort is coming there?
So you're right, like in this year, we'll probably end up we have 1 month to go now, less than a month. We'll probably be about 42.1 lakh, which is 4.21 million. That's about 8% above last year level. Last year was 38.9 lakhs. But the projection for next year is that while the volumes will come in proportion with the economic growth, in line with that, but the growth may not be as high because of the very high base that we see. Remember, this year a large portion of the base which has built up, which is reflected in this year's volume, is because a large part of the pending demand has got sort of fulfilled in this, and that's because from July of 2023 we have seen a much better supply situation thanks to the overcoming of the semiconductor crisis. So I would expect next year volumes to be at a high level, 43 million plus, 4.3 million plus, but for passenger vehicles, but the growth over this current levels might be in single digits.
Well, if we talk about your journey from small car to hatchbacks, after hatchbacks coming to smaller sedans and SUVs, then you took that ambitious target of becoming the #1 player. Tell us more about your SUV plans. We have seen your compact SUVs to full-blown SUVs to 4x4 SUVs. What about the market share and the journey ahead for SUVs? Isn't the market share something which you still aspire to grow now?
Yeah, absolutely. And you have hit at a very critical and the core of our strategy at which we are grappling with at this moment. And I'll give you a broad framework so that people understand. Our market share target is 50%. We want to have 50% of the passenger vehicle industry. So if you look at hatches, we have a market share of close to 70%. In vans, we have market share close to 95%. In sedans now, especially if you see the entry sedans, which are the largest portion, we are 55% of the market. In MPVs, we are more than 50% of the market. This one segment where we have not touched that 50, and that is SUV. And SUV, as it happens, have been increasing. In fact, this year, 50% of the market will be SUV. There, last year, our market share was 11%, which means that it is pulling down our overall market share hugely. Therefore, we decided that if we want to get to that 50% target, we need to increase market share in SUVs. So again, when we go further deeper into this, we found we have only one SUV, which was Vitara, which was the Brezza. It was doing very well. It was the #1 SUV. Still, our market share was 11% because we realized that there were 47 competing products in this segment and we had only one. Clearly, it meant that we had to strengthen our portfolio, and we did that. We started with the Grand Vitara in September of last year, 2023. Then 22. In 2023, we introduced the Jimny and the Fronx in our along with the new Brezza. So we now have 4 SUVs, and that has quickly brought our market share to about 22%. So it's like doubled. In fact, we became the #1 SUV manufacturer for H1 of this year, this fiscal. So it's a great increase. You can say one hand double, but it's still at 22. So still this SUV share is pulling us down and not allowing us to reach the 50%. We are at around 43% of the market share. Clearly, we need to do more to get our market share.
Certain customer preferences and demands are growing faster than before. How is Maruti Suzuki handling it all? Mr. Srivastava will tell us all about that. Sir, from past, present to the future now, we can see a lot of cars here. What about the future? What are you going to do about it now?
Yeah, so we, at Maruti Suzuki, we do believe that India and Indian auto space has a great future. Current volumes, which the industry is doing, I just told you, is 4.2 million. It is expected to become 6 billion in the next 6 years. And in fact, to give you the task at hand for us, we took 40 years to come up to a volume of 2 million in Maruti Suzuki. And we are aiming at the next 2 million in the next 6 years. So what took us 40 years, the past 40, we have to do the same thing in the next 6 years. So that's the enormity as far as volume is concerned. But more than that, it's also about not just getting more models, developing more models, but also because technology is changing very fast, we have to be very agile in terms of how we react to consumer changing preferences. I think we probably, the SUV market grew faster than our expectation. That resulted in that market share we were discussing. But now we have very nice SUVs. We want to get more volumes. Of course, we keep watching. There are changes happening in response to the emission regulations on the powertrain itself. So today, for example, we have CNG, we have biogas, we have EVs, we have hybrids, and you see some of them here. Our EV will be, our first EV will be launched in the next financial year. So we are preparing for that. So essentially, the large volumes is not just about getting more products with agility and also to take care of the consumer changing preferences. It also means that our network has to increase, when our distribution has to increase. Same goes for our warehousing, for spares, accessories. Same goes also for the changing consumer buying process, which is about digitalization, which our company is doing, so investing so heavily in. And it's digitalization changing not just the consumer preference, but also the manufacturing process, the design process, the logistics process, the supply chain. So we have to work on all these aspects, and we have to do it at not only the scale has to be done with skill and also with speed. That is the challenge.
So earlier you were a bit slow about EV. Now suddenly there is EV every time. EVX we are talking about, the market is waiting for your EV so that there can be something big coming from the market leader. What is the plan over there? But do you think that the chargers have gone to places, the charging will not be an issue? What about, because your customer is really mass market most of the time.
So, this is a question often asked to me on our EV plans. Is Maruti Suzuki late to the EV? You were just mentioning how we had a slow start. Actually, it's not about introduction of the car, which is like the technology is available. We were actually having plans earlier. We were testing our earlier EVs, which we didn't introduce. We waited for. And the reason for that is that while the optics may not look so good because of the late coming in the EV, but we are more focused on customer convenience. And I have been working here for more than 30 years. I can tell you that at Maruti Suzuki, if the choice is between optics and customer convenience, 100 times out of 100, we will choose customer convenience. And we believe that one of the reasons why EV market hasn't really taken off, the adoption rate is only 2.1%, 2.2% even this year, is because one, cost of acquisition is high for the EVs, and that's because the battery cost is high. And second, because the charging infrastructure is limited, and that gives what is known as a range anxiety among consumers. So we are working on these two aspects. Suzuki has invested 10,000 crore plus in battery and battery related components, so to localize, and that should give us a competitive advantage. But also we are working on charging infrastructure, and you are right, the charging infrastructure in our country is really not so well developed. First of all, Indian research shows 53% of Indian car buyers have specific parking space. You require, and most of the time people charge at home. So that's one issue. And on the public charging infrastructure, we have much lower infrastructure, number of public charging stations compared with what is really required. The thumb rule is 1 every 10 EVs. But we are nowhere near that. We are at, I think, 1 every 17 or 18.
So what is USP going to be? The range, 500 kilometer or less than that?
So the range, the EVX, which is our vehicle, which you see here, which we showed in the Auto Expo, this was what, this will be launched, the production model of this will be launched. This has got a battery of 60 kilowatt, which means a range in excess of 550 kilometers. And that's what I think consumers are looking at, no range anxiety. But at the same time, we have to look at making it convenient for consumers to charge their batteries. And that's part of our plans, which we are working on before we introduce the EVX to the Indian consumer.
So here we spoke to Mr. Shashank Srivastava of Maruti Suzuki about the present, about the future, and what the whole company was in the past as well. Well, the company clearly has good goals, and larger ambitions to be #1 SUV player, and electric car is coming this year. How is it going to really pan out for the industry? We have to wait for the future for that. Thank you once again for watching us.